one of the last warmest days we'll have for for maybe all next week. We'll see. We're going to get some snow tomorrow, I guess. And just we're looking at the temperatures are going to be cool all next week. So, but it is still winter, right? I mean, it's teasiness. You don't think so? Oops, my clicker. Well, we're still on our series. We got this. This is the second to last class. So next week will be our last class, starting the 1st of March. Ryan Gross is going to start us on a class for 4 weeks on David, I believe, if I'm correct with what he said. David, I believe, what he told me. So, so again, integrity. Your integrity impacts our world. My integrity impacts our world. Your integrity impacts my world, and my integrity impacts your world. It's a complete package. And integrity, again, is one of those words we don't really see and hear or think much of a biblical word, but it sure is part of the Bible, very powerful, as we've seen. The one thing I want us to make sure that we remember is that at least our main verse that we've been talking about, usually in each one of them, is the stand up straight, right? It's out of Proverbs 11. It says, the integrity and the moral courage of the upright will guide them, but the crookedness of the treacherous will destroy them. How powerful. We've got a couple more quotes today. First quote is from Jacqueline Bisset. Anyone remember Jacqueline Bisset? I think we all maybe, some of us do. She's an actress. It says, character contributes to beauty. It fortifies a woman as her youth fades. A mode of conduct, a standard of courage, discipline, fortitude, and integrity can do a great deal to make a woman beautiful. Yes, beauty comes from not just from the skin. So, and this is one of my favorite ones here today, is by Warren Buffett. In looking for people to hire, look for 3 qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they don't have the first one, the other 2 will kill you. You know, and it's amazing because in business, we see, we want to have the smartest, we want to have the brightest, we want to have someone who's got a lot of energy, but do they really think much about their integrity? Because if they don't have that, I'm not even going to. They're just the worst one for you, because I think it's because it's going to be all about me type thing. Yeah, I've got intelligence and I've got energy, and I'm going to use it to make myself look better. And he didn't want that. So, well, as you recall. We've been talking. We're going to try to finish up today. I'm sure we will, hopefully, finish up our class from last week early, which was about Daniel in the lion's den, right? Again, one of the most famous stories in the Bible. We've all heard it from childhood on up. Again, if you remember, this is a point where Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar's gone, his son is gone, and now Darius comes into play. And Darius decides he's going to get 120 satraps and for all of his territory, and all of those he's going to have 3 leaders that they're going to report to. And out of those 3 leaders, one of them is Daniel, of course. Now, why do you think he picked Daniel? A reputation. So probably Darius had heard of this, right? I mean, he wasn't probably around, but when he comes here, he goes, what? Okay, so tell me about who I can trust, who I can be. And you can bet that Daniel's name came up. He's like, well, if you want to know a guy who's been doing such a good job, one of them you need to really look into is Daniel, right? And then the other one would be this guy, and the other one would be this guy, maybe. So he's got three of them. But there's something a little bit more, interesting about Daniel. And what's, we've got these other 2 guys, and you wonder how this story kind of came about. These other 2 guys probably didn't like Daniel too much. Most likely because, they've probably been in government for quite some time, but, they're doing the normal government thing, but Daniel wouldn't follow the normal, he wouldn't take the bribes probably that these guys were taking. They knew about Daniel. It wasn't just they said, oh, hi, Daniel, how you doing? First time I met you, oh, how you doing? These guys very much knew each other. And he'd of course been in power under King Nebi for quite some time, so that, they all kind of they all run in the same group, so all of these politicians and leaders all kind of know each other. But if you remember, what it was is in Daniel 6:4, at this time, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds against Daniel and about his government and about his conduct in the government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him, because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. And I put in there, a man of integrity, as some versions will say. So they tried their darndest, right? But it's obvious that I think Darius just didn't play. I don't think they just got along as just buddies. Hey, how you doing? You golf? Yeah, we're like, oh, well, let's go out and play golf together. I think that he knew of his integrity. He knew of who he was. And therefore, we see that, Darius, even we read that he was planning on putting Daniel over the other two. Why would you? Come on now. And he was even pointed out, he's not even from here. Why would you do that? Why would you put him in over us two? Why can't we have the same power? So they were, of course, pretty upset about that, right? So remember what they did is they planned a way to try to get rid of Daniel. Let's figure this out. They sent Daniel off to go check something else out, and all of the guys got together and say, how in the world do we get rid of this guy? Because he's just going to cause us problems. He's not going to let things go. We need to get these bribes. We need to make sure things are ran the way we want. And lo and behold, their plan worked, didn't it? They knew exactly where to attack him. They went to his Achilles heel. But did Daniel sway? No, he didn't. And of course he ended up getting thrown into the lion's den, even though Darius tried his darndest to try to get him not to have that happen. And how we kind of got close to the end and said, we all know how the story ends, right? But I also reminded us that really we could stop the story here because one of the main points about the story happened right here. And we don't want to miss one of these major points. And the point had already happened that Daniel did this because he knew the end of the story. He knew what would win. Because Daniel's primary concern was not the outcome of his decision. He already made up his mind, right? He already made up his mind. He was a man of integrity. Again, like I pointed out, if Daniel's concern was about the outcome, like I probably would have been, I think he would have made a different decision. I would have said, hey, 30 days, time for me to go on vacation. I'm going to go back home, check things out, just see how things are going there. I can do this, no problem. It's been a while since I've been back there anyway. I'll just go ahead and take off, and I don't have to create a problem here. But we know that that didn't happen. Again, his primary concern was to do the right thing, no matter what the cost. And again, he knew at this point what the cost was going to be. Right? It wasn't a guess. He knew exactly what it was because he was already knowing that he was going to be thrown into the lion's den. And like I said, there was no guarantee for Daniel. It did say that he prayed to God. I'm sure he prayed to God to say, let's see what we can come up to fix here. And we're in our life and our situations that we're in, there's no guarantee for us either. But it's still, if we're going to be people of integrity, we should do the right thing no matter what the cost. Remember, anything that we gain by sacrifice our integrity can or guarantee will be taken away someday. No matter what you think you can trade for integrity, you'll end up losing that. And you'll lose your integrity as well. There's only one thing I mentioned that we can't lose, and that's what we do. That's what we make our mind up to do. That can never be taken away. Daniel won before he knew the outcome. He already made up his mind. He won. And the question was, how many of us think that we're good at controlling outcomes? And then last week I said, actually we're not good at predicting outcomes. How many here predicted who was going to win the Super Bowl last week? How many here got it right? Steve got it right? Did you get the point spread right? Okay. But did you have a point spread? Did you think, well, I think it's going to be this? Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, but like I said, there's a whole industry. I mean, you bet all that betting down that the people were betting not only who was going to win, but by what sort of a point spread that they were going to win. And I just know, and then their whole life just revolves around that. But the only thing possibly that we can control is ourselves, right? And that's we think, oh yeah, I can do that, but that's very difficult, isn't it? That's just almost impossible to do. And this is where I brought up the point where Andy Stanley had talked about his dad, and he was when he was a young preacher, he was faced with some decisions that a few of the leaders had put him in, and he had the choice do I do this for them, or do I do the right thing, or do I do it because I don't want to cause waves? And they went back and forth, And his dad finally decided, look, I'm going to be a man of integrity, and he came up with this saying, actually. He said, my response is to obey God and leave all the consequences to him. This is one of those things, definitely be if you want to put something on in your bathroom window or bathroom mirror or whatever, or bedside or whatever, on the fridge. My response is to obey God and to leave all the consequences to him. Because, he's big enough to handle them, isn't he? I like a lot of times we think, I don't want to put this on God. I can handle this. I can do it. But no, God is the one who we really need to have handle it. So we'll get a little bit back to our story here. So Darius runs back to the lion's den, if you remember. We know the end of the story, but Darius runs back there. I mean, he is just, he's hopeful. He's a man of hope. It says, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? And Daniel was saying, you bet Daniel probably just kind of stood back there for a while. He probably didn't answer right off the bat. He kind of let him roast a little bit. But it's interesting because Daniel's answer is, he answered, may the king live forever. So, I mean, what sort of respect? I mean, who's the guy who put him in there? Darius put him in there. But he says, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. And again, he goes on to nor have I ever done anything wrong before you, your majesty, to prove that point. He still wants to, when he comes out, he wants to be good with Darius. He wants to be right with him. He doesn't want to go, I'm not going to, I know what you did then. I'm going to remember that, boy. You remember, paybacks, watch this. No. He's a man of integrity. He knew that it wasn't, that Darius was put between a rock and a hard place. Darius didn't want to do it. So another question for us just to ponder. You don't have to answer, but would God do this for us? Do you really think God would do this for us? Would God close the mouths of the lions for you? When we do the right thing, will God intervene and rescue us? Has he? Does it matter? Does it really matter? Do we have to answer that question? Do we have to have an answer? There's one thing that Andy said, does it matter? If we realize that God is always in control, that he's going to face the consequences, does it really matter? We spend a lot of time wondering if it matters, see if it matters. We think there's an importance to that. Did it really matter to Daniel? I think he proved that it didn't. Whatever the outcome was, he was good. He already won because he put his faith and his hope in God. I wanted to look at a few. Let me see if I got my next one here. Not quite. I wanted to look at a few other examples that we really haven't touched on here because, again, we've talked about basically men, but there's a lot of women who were women of integrity in the Bible as well. Anyone have some names of some women of you think who would be women of integrity in the Bible? Women. Ruth, Esther, Deborah, mm-hmm. Yeah. Abigail, Mary. That's good. Who? Dorcas? I always think of Dorcas Lane when we see that in our movie show. But yeah, there's a number of them, of course. Here's just a few that you guys have said a lot of these right here, of course. Abigail, Esther, Ruth, Deborah, Hannah, Mary. Again, if you look up all of their stories, you're going to find some point where you're going to see there's integrity. Now, here's the interesting thing, though, because back then, as a woman, it was probably very difficult to have integrity, at least show your integrity, because you were basically owned by your husband. You basically, whatever they said, you were more or less pushed to the side. So it was if you showed integrity, you were kind of stepping out. And again, it doesn't really matter. I'm making up my mind. I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do. Because there was a lot of pressure on them to just stay in line and do what you're supposed to do. Again, one of the first ones I want to look at is Abigail. And that's, of course, in 1 Samuel 25. And if you remember the story, she was a very courageous woman. She risked her life, which, gets place the ultimate thing. She risked her life. Firstly, what her husband, who wasn't a very good guy, but very powerful. But he had had some people out, and the soldiers came and asked him that, hey, we need to have some supplies, some food, some of this and that. And he just basically said, what do you mean? I'm not going to give you anything. Just, you guys are bothering me. Who is this? Who's your leader? I don't really care who David is. Who is this guy? So of course, they came back and they told the whole family. And the wife found out about it. And she goes, oh, I know this David guy. So she decided on her own that she was going to go there to David and apologize for him and say, please, I plead with you. Let's now so she didn't even tell her husband Nabal about this, but she went there all on her own, took the matters into her own hand, and she met with David. And when she did, he listened to her, and he knew of her integrity. She went there on her own, which is probably something that no woman would have done. All these soldiers were on the road. Who knows what trouble she could have got in there. She went through a mountain ravine on a donkey all by herself, which, again, is something that, probably was a nay-nay back then. But she showed her courage and her motivation, and she pleaded for those lives, didn't she? And why? She was prepared. She didn't care what the outcome was. She made up her mind that it was the right thing to do. She could have came back and been killed. She knew that. I mean, there was a very good chance of that. But she made up her mind and did the right thing. She made up her mind ahead of time and did the right thing. Uh-huh. He went to her, yeah. Yeah, because he knew that he wasn't, going to do anything. But again, she saved this guy who wasn't a very good guy's life, because of, but why? Because she was, of everybody, yeah. So very important. Like I said, it's you could do a whole 8-week study on Abigail, of course. And one of the next ones is Ruth, right? The decision and loyalty and responsibility that Ruth was that she had was set her apart and showed her character and her integrity, right? And again, we all probably know the story. Her loyalty to her mother-in-law. She decided, I'm going to take care of her instead of go back to the easy life. And her work ethic. When she decided she was going to go out into the field and just take the last parts. Follow behind just so that she could do it. And Boaz, the guy that owned the field, and notice who's this over here? What's she doing? He could talk that she was a person of integrity. That's something interesting. When you talk to someone, you can pretty much not too long after you can tell if they're a person of integrity. I think it's very easy to see what their motive is. It's something that he's seen, and of course, again, later on, she married him. She had the blessings and reward of that by getting her redemption through her marriage. And also, if you recall, she's in the lineage of Jesus as well. I mean, her continues on that, her future generations was in the lineage of Jesus as well. So very, very, very good to know that there is also many women in the Bible who are women of integrity as well. And of course, again, like these women, they all understood that integrity doesn't always guarantee a happily ever after, right? These aren't all happily ever after stories. Some part of them may be, but again, they're looking for the future. If we look at this, what sort of lineage in the future? She didn't know what was going to happen in the future. But what she did there, she set in place those sort of things. There's when we go to funerals a lot of times, we hear stories and we hear, I remember, this is a story I know about it. And then, that's a lot of times, that's probably the last time we may hear about that sort of thing. We don't hear too much about it anymore. But there's some stories that continue on for generations about people who did things and did things right. And we're reading about some of them right here. Why did these people get picked for the Bible? Toss of a coin or something? No. It's because, there's no way that they knew ahead of time that we would be talking to them now in 2022 and discussing how their integrity was. And wouldn't it be great if we could do something small, And it's not saying, well, yeah, so-and-so, he invented this, and he was the CEO of that, and how great he was here. But something that your family would bring down through generations, and who knows, could be turned into. Adam, did I see you had something to say?
It's great. I mean, with the Old Testament, I mean, a lot of these stories, they're there. But I mean, also think of this. I mean, she's in the genealogy of Jesus. I mean, with that, being what great grandparents or whatever of King David. Um, I mean, even if it just ties it back. I mean, we didn't get Matthew didn't write his genealogy until after the death of Christ, and Luke same. And just think of that suddenly there's a story, in the Old Testament. It's been there the entire time, and it just gives weight to it. Yeah. It's just like, why is this in here? Why is this? It's not, I mean, it's great to see where God not only uses people, but also uses people to show who he is.
Right. Well, here in our life, we always tend to like the stories that they all lived happily ever after, right? I mean, we love the Disney movies that, you see all the conflict, but, at the end, they all live happily ever after. And it's just how we want to live our life, right? I mean, isn't it better? Isn't it nicer if everything just works out, right? Wouldn't that be great? Mike?
Just another highlight to what Adam was saying. Rahab is the other woman other than Mary. Abigail isn't actually mentioned, or rather Ruth is not actually mentioned, but Boaz is.
Right.
And Rahab was Boaz's grandmother.
Right.
So she was a foreigner too, just like Ruth.
Yeah. I know, it's amazing. But again, how we like to live happily ever after, right? Wouldn't that be nice if life could be that way? We all have stories here. Every one of us know that our life or lives around us do not always go smooth. I mean, it's part of life. People pass away. Mark just got to coming back from his mother's funeral. How many other people people that you've known have had COVID, have problems? It's just kind of. It's just part of who we are. We need to embrace that. This is what life is. Lou just had a brother-in-law pass away. And then these things kind of flood back. We kind of look at our life. We look at other people's lives, and it's okay that things are bad, because that's what life is all about. We're never going to live in a happily ever after. It goes back to also to the outcome of our decisions. They mean more to. They mean more to our Heavenly Father than they do to us, that we don't even realize. If the outcome of our decision means more to you than doing the will of our Heavenly Father, Andy says, I hate to say it, but it might mean that we are not really a follower of Jesus, but a user of Jesus. And he gave an example. He said, here's an example. Judas was a user, right? They're all marching into Jerusalem. He's signed up way before, and this all sounds good. This guy's going to be the king, and he's going to take things over. And this is all going to go well. But they get there, and he goes, "This isn't going the way I thought it would be." I thought Jesus was going to be the Messiah. We're going to, I'm going to be part of this. I'm going to be in on this, and I'm going to be, part of this good thing that's good for me, right? Yeah. So quietly, he switched sides, right? He switched sides, and he sacrificed his integrity, and he got paid for it, right? He got something, like I said earlier, he got something, but I guarantee you it's going to be taken away. But he lost his integrity. He got 30 pieces of silver, He lost his integrity, and even if he hadn't had an untimely death, he would have lost those 30 pieces of silver, right? And it would have been a lose-lose. That part wasn't in the Bible. We didn't, they didn't really specify that. But that's really what happened, He was not a man of integrity. We all know that. I don't know how many of you have friends named Judas. It's not a very common name that people use for people, has connotations to it, right? The problem is, how do we get away from this? We stop bargaining. We stop, well, if I do this, I'm going to get this. Well, maybe if I do this, this will happen. If I do this, I'll get this job, I'll get this position, and then everything will work out. If I date this person, then that's what makes me, there's just all these sort of things. We just need to remember, we need to stop bargaining, because it's not about outcomes. Again, as I've said, Daniel wasn't focused on the outcome. It's about devotion. it was obvious when Jesus took the direction that he did, going into Jerusalem, getting arrested, going to trial. You can bet all of the disciples were going, what's he doing? Why are we doing this? We could have saved him back in the garden if he would just let us fight him. We already chopped off one of the guy's ears. We could have saved him. But Jesus wasn't focused on his arrest, was he? Or the outcome of his arrest. He wasn't focused on what was right in front of him. He wasn't focused on the now. He was focused on the later, right? And we'll see next week that Jesus is showing us what Jesus' life was pure integrity. Pure integrity. And he, again, knowing that later was more important than the now. And he even prayed in the garden. I wish there was another way. I wish there was another way. But really, deep down, he knew what he had to do was good for the later, right? And just as Daniel had a win, we know that Jesus had even a bigger win, didn't he? And the win that he won for us. The win that Jesus won by doing what he was supposed to do, by knowing what the long focus was, he won for us. We're the big win in this. Again, there's been plenty of people that said, those darn Jews, if they just wouldn't have, the Jews killed Jesus, and if they would have, and again, there's been wars fought over this sort of thing, but about, why did you kill the Messiah? Well, it's not about that. Jesus had this all planned, right? Jesus didn't really care what the Pharisees thought about him. His reputation was not at stake. He didn't really care about his reputation. He wasn't trying to convince Pilate of his innocence. We see that. Speak to me, tell me, help me here, help me so I can get you out of this. No, he wasn't worried about that, was he? Now, Pilate, on the other hand, he was more interested in keeping peace with the Jews, wasn't he? Not rocking the boat. He didn't want to have Rome find out that he had some troubles going on in his area, did he? Because then they're going to send in some people, and maybe he's going to lose his power and his position, right? So did Pilate exhibit any integrity in that story? Probably not much, did he? He went with the flow. He went with what's going to be the best outcome for him personally, didn't he? It's interesting because when you start looking at these things in different contexts, then you pull up some verses and you're like, oh, that makes even more sense. Remember in John 6:38, Jesus said, I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. Well, no way, Jesus. You're the one. I thought you're the one with all the power. I thought you're the one. Look, following you. You're the one that's going to save us. You're the one that's going to be the new Messiah. You're the one that's going to do this. It's your will. You're the one that controls this. It's real easy to see that we think Jesus had an agenda. But no. Remember what he said. I've not come down to do my will. I've come down to do the will of him who sent me. How many of us are here to do our will? I think it's inbred in us as humans. We've got something that we want to do. We got a plan, and we want it to work out the way that we plan to work out. How many grandchildren do you want? How close do you want to live to them? How close do you want them to live to you? How many times are you going to take them out fishing? What are you going to teach them that that you're going to make sure that they understand? There's just so many things we can say that, we have an agenda. We really do. And we want it to work out. But if we turned it around and says, I'm not here to do my will. I'm here to do the will of the person that sent me here, of God who sent me here. It throws a different spin on it, doesn't it? Very, very difficult to even fathom what that is. Or how do we go about doing it? Well, that's the win. Again, doing the will of our Father in heaven is the win. That's what Jesus' win was. He knew what the outcome was way before. And just as we've seen in some of Randy's messages in the past few weeks, one of the key points of being a disciple of Jesus, one of those 4 or 5 was to follow him, right? One of the things we need to do is to follow Jesus. How many times did Jesus say that? Follow me, right? And all of us, we're supposed to follow him. And if we could just get that one thing down, here's the promise. Follow me, and what you gain can never be taken away. Follow me, and what you gain can never be taken away. So, what's our win if we follow Jesus? He doesn't say it's easy. Was it easy for Jesus? I think we see a lot of times where he's put in a lot of situations where I wouldn't want to be put in. But he won, and he won for us. So is it worth it? Do you think? Can we really actually do it? These are some good questions. Can we prove to the world that we are people of integrity? Again, you don't have to prove it to yourself. It's when you're gone and they talk about you at your funeral, the one thing I'm going to strive to do is that I'm going to strive that they'll say, Jeff was a man of integrity. Not that he did this or did that, but hopefully I can learn to be more of a person of integrity. That's something we can all strive to be. Difficult, yes. Possible, yes. Again, this next week's going to be our last week. It's going to kind of round things up. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Jesus. Actually, next week we're going to focus on Jesus. But I wanted to have some statements here that I want you to be thinking about. And maybe we'll just ask a few questions about these, and maybe kind of get them sunk in. Is it possible to stay out of trouble and do nothing for someone who's having trouble? Is it possible to be financially responsible and selfish? Is it possible to be self-controlled and judgmental? Is it even possible to be carefully personally and yet uncaring? Is it possible to be blameless yet unsympathetic? Is it possible to keep your hands clean without offering anyone else a hand? Is it possible to do good without doing any good? Is it possible to be a good person without doing good for another person? These are some difficult questions, but I can say this, at least the first century Jewish leaders would have agreed to every one of these statements. And they seem to live by them quite well. And I wonder, really, if a good portion of our society today wouldn't consider them the norm as well. Because they're all very self-seeking, don't you think? And they're some people could say these are really good to live by statements, Is it possible to be a good person without doing good to another? Hey, I'm a good guy. Why wouldn't God, I'm showing I'm a good person, But how do you show that? Well, I'm not doing anybody any harm. I'm not hurting anybody. So if we look at this list, does any of these stand out to any of you? Anything catch? Or a question or a thought?
There's a significant difference between being a good person and doing good in the mind of our culture. So, and I think there's a lot of people who are much more focused on being a good person than they are on actually doing good for another person.
Right. Well, again, you can be, we maybe all work with somebody and say, that guy's he's a good guy. He's a good head, But have you ever, why is he a good person? What are you basing that on? Well, he doesn't cause trouble around the office, he seems like he's doing okay. He goes out golfing on Saturdays, he tells me, has a good time, and he's.
I don't steal, I don't lie, I don't cheat, but that's not the same thing as doing something good for another person.
Right. right, right, right. That's okay.
One is about what the individual does for somebody else. If you look at the two above, it's the same thing. It's that perspective Chris spoke to. It's about what am I doing for myself, but what am I doing for somebody else? God could have easily sent Christ down for himself, okay? But he didn't. He sent him down for us, all right? So he wasn't selfish with Christ. The idea was we were going to be inclusive. We were not going to be exclusive, me and Christ, and that's all there was in the world. So as a Christian person, I don't know how you live without one without doing the other. I don't know how you do that. Yeah, so.
But again, if you look at it, as Andy brought this up, is that, this is how the first century, Pharisees and Sadducees and the leaders, this was kind of their mantra. This is, you could say, is it possible to stay out of trouble and do nothing for someone, who's having trouble? Sure, that's their, I'm staying out of it, But I don't have to do anything for that person, do I? That's their problem. They need to solve that, right? Steve had another comment.
Well, I think what kind of already been said is, but there's an element of selfishness, I think, in all of those, is that that I care about what it is for me. I care about what I'm doing or how I am viewed or the way I feel about myself, and which is the opposite. Jesus says that we're supposed to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And so, and I think that's the element behind a bunch of these things. If we want to get them in the right perspective, is that we have to love others just like we love ourselves. And so you have to be doing these things for other people. We have to care about other people, and we can't just care about our own selves.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like number 2 there. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think a lot of this is covered by James chapter 2. Brother Jesus is writing to Christians and says, "My brothers and sisters, believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ must not show favoritism." Oops, that's in the wrong passage. I'm sorry. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can see why there was such a rift between the leaders of the time and Jesus, because again, that goes against what they were. That's not right, Mark. You didn't. Hold it. Wait. That's the right thing to do, but that's not what they were doing.
To go along with what Mark was saying, I've heard that said, that's your bless your heart passage. Oh, bless your heart. We've just discovered, that you're not quite doing well, or bless their heart. And we can get into that mode of just thinking that all we have to do is say the words and think that, but not follow up with action. And I always laugh when I think of that passage, because the woman who said it was like, "Oh, that's your, it's okay, so sorry." And then you go home and your pantry is full of food. Mm-hmm. And you have more clothes than you know what to do with. But you don't really do just a simple thing even sometimes in offering something to someone. So I think we can all easily get into that mode of bless your heart, mm-hmm. and not really follow anything up with it.
Well, I remember a video once we watched of Rick Ashley was talking. He told us about, I forget what exactly the theme was, but he was he told this joke about, well, there's this old guy that or the preacher goes to see some old guy, and when he went there, the guy had a heart attack. And he said, "Well, what do you mean heart attack?" We found out that he had actually in his will or in his finances when he died, that he gave the church a whole bunch of money. And he's like, so the preacher was the one who had the heart attack because he couldn't believe that actually someone would do that. That, again, they were well off, and they actually, gave some of their money to the church to help the church actually go. This is something we don't really hear of. It's like, Why would you, you got a family. Why would you, in your will, put part of that money to go to your church? We've had people do that, but it's a very odd, it's not a very common thing. You would think it would be almost a common thing, right? We give. Why wouldn't we continue to give? We want to give to benefit others and for longevity. And how does that happen? By give it to our kids and then go out and buy a new car or something? There's a lot. We got to take care of our families, obviously, but it just kind of caught me odd that second one is when I read that. That's what came to mind, was that one that it said, is it possibly financially responsible and yet selfish? Yeah, I think it's very easily too. Anyone else have any thoughts? Well, again, we'll see next week. I think this helps tie into when we start talking next week, because, again, how many stories do we see of Jesus and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the leaders, having some rough edges? They're always out to try to get him, and you wonder why. Well, if you look at how their life and how they viewed things, you can see why when Jesus said something, they just went, "Oh, I can't believe it. Why would he say that? Why would he say it's possible you have to be good to other people? That doesn't make sense." So I think it'll tie in as we close this out next week. So again, I just want to thank everyone for all of your thoughts and questions and comments, and we'll continue on this next week. Let's go ahead and have a closing prayer. Dear wonderful God, it's great that we can call you Father, and for all that you have done for us, for all the things that we just don't even comprehend. We just thank you for putting into place your plan and your action, dear Father. And for this little part of the world that we're out here right now, we just want to praise your name, praise your goodness, your glory, praise the building we have to meet in, the warmth that we have, the beauty that surrounds us in this part of this world, just the many blessings, dear Father, our health, our family, our friends, all the good things, dear Father, that you've given us far outweigh the bad things that we have to deal with in our lives. And we just thank you for that. We thank you for showing us integrity through many people in our lives, as well as people in history, and the importance of it. And as we finish up next week, dear Father, it'll be great to discuss the great and wonderful our Lord and Savior and the integrity that he shows as well. Again, it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.